They called it Morehead, but in the summer of 1885, it was closer to a battlefield than a town. Gun smoke hung over Main Street. Windows were boarded. Families slept with rifles across their laps. And everyone, from shopkeepers to schoolchildren, knew one name: Tolliver. Craig Tolliver ran Rowan County like a warlord. If you crossed him, you didn't get a warning. You got a funeral. Men were shot down in daylight. Judges were ambushed on horseback. Houses were burned out of pure spite. And every killing demanded another killing in return. It wasn't justice. It wasn't politics. It was a blood oath. A feud so violent the governor finally sent the Kentucky State Guard to shut it down. Most Kentuckians today barely know the story, but the ghosts of Rowan County remember. This is Kentucky Bloodlines, Season 4 of Deadly Truths, and I'm Becca. And today we're opening the doors on a 3-year war that turned a quiet bluegrass town into a killing ground, a feud far bloodier than Hatfield's and McCoy's, and almost as savage as the Harp brothers themselves. This is the Rowan County War. Before the first shot was ever fired, Rowan County was already split clean down the middle. 2 families, 2 power structures, 2 men who refused to back down. On one side, the Martins, old settlers, politically connected, tied into the courthouse and the local elite. On the other, the Tollivers, proud, stubborn, armed to the teeth, and led by a man whose temper could flip a peaceful room into a war zone in under 10 seconds. It didn't start with murder. It started with an election, a county clerk race, a few insults, whiskey, bruised pride. Then somebody pulled a gun, and the moment the first body hit the dust, the fuse was lit. For the next 3 years, Rowan County would be ruled not by law but by fear, and by whichever family had the most men ready to kill on their behalf. This wasn't the frontier, this was Kentucky, and the state was about to learn just how quickly a political disagreement could turn into a full-blown war. It happened on Election Day, 1884. The courthouse yard was packed. Farmers, laborers, town men, all crowding around the ballot box while the Martins and the Tollivers circled each other like wolves waiting for a stumble. Words were exchanged. Whiskey sloshed. Somebody laughed at the wrong time, and then the match hit the powder. A gunshot snapped through the crowd. Men dove. Women screamed. Horses reared. When the smoke cleared, Solomon Bradley, a Martin supporter, lay bleeding out in the dirt. He didn't stand a chance. The Tolliver men were already fanning out, hands on gun belts, daring anybody to say who fired first. The Martins claimed it was murder. The Tollivers called it self-defense. But the truth didn't matter anymore. A line had been crossed. Bradley's death wasn't a single act of violence. It was an invitation, and both families accepted it. That night, armed riders moved through Morehead like shadows hunting shadows. Doors were kicked in. Men were dragged onto porches and beaten. Threats turned into promises. By sunrise, Rowan County wasn't a county. It was a battlefield waiting for its next shot. Craig Tolliver didn't become a leader because people respected him. He became a leader because people feared him. After Solomon Bradley's killing, Rowan County was cracking apart. Deputies wouldn't patrol. Judges were intimidated. Witnesses suddenly forgot everything they saw. That vacuum, that silence, was exactly where Craig thrived. Craig was the kind of man who walked into a room and everyone stopped breathing for a second. Thick-shouldered, quick-tempered. A fighter first, a thinker never. But he had one thing that mattered more than brains. Loyal men with loaded guns. Brothers, cousins, hired muscle. Half the Tolliver clan acted like Craig was the sheriff, judge, and executioner rolled into one. By early 1885, he made his move. He didn't sneak into power. He took it. Craig Tolliver set up headquarters at the American Hotel in downtown Morehead. From that vantage point, he controlled everything that mattered: the road to the courthouse, the businesses, the flow of money, who came and who left the county alive. Merchants paid him to keep the peace. Citizens kept quiet to stay breathing. And anyone who so much as nodded toward the Martins risked catching a bullet under their ribs. Morehead began operating on Craig time. Craig rules, Craig justice. Local officials complained to Frank Fort, but letters can't stop a man who settles disputes with a shotgun. And with every week he remained unchallenged, the feud metastasized. More shootings, more bodies, more men choosing sides because neutrality had become a death sentence. Craig Tolliver was no Harp brother. He wasn't a drifter or a bandit. He was worse. He was a man with a home, an army, and a town too terrified to fight him. And he wasn't anywhere near finished. Once Craig Tolliver had the American Hotel locked down, the killing didn't slow. It accelerated. The Martins knew they were losing ground. So they did what every desperate clan does when cornered. They struck first and struck ugly. A Martin rider spotted two Tolliver men crossing a narrow footbridge at Triplet Creek. No cover, no witnesses, just two men on horseback with their rifles slung low. The Martins stepped out of the brush and opened fire at point-blank range. The shots blew both men off their saddles and straight into the creek. One died instantly. The other thrashed in the water, screaming, until a second bullet hit him behind the ear and sent him drifting downstream like discarded livestock. Word hit Morehead within an hour. Craig Tolliver didn't bury his dead quietly. He gathered a dozen men, saddled up, and rode into the night with murder in his jaw. Their target was Hiram Martin, a key player, loudmouth, and cousin to half the Martin clan. The Tollivers found him drinking at a general store with two hired guards. The moment Hiram stepped out onto the porch, Craig gave the order. The air exploded. Windows shattered, barrels splintered, gunfire rolled across the valley like thunder tearing open the sky. Hiram staggered back, hands clutching his stomach, intestines slipping out between his fingers. His guards tried to drag him to cover, but Craig walked straight toward them, firing every step. When Craig reached the porch, Hiram was on his knees, choking on blood. Craig put the barrel under his chin and pulled the trigger. The bullet blew out the back of his skull and painted the store wall red. There was no message left behind. The message was the body. From that moment, the feud turned feral. A Martin sympathizer was gunned down feeding his horses. A Tolliver cousin was found stabbed to death in a churchyard, throat opened ear to ear. A deputy trying to stay neutral caught a stray bullet to the spine and died screaming in the street. One family home burned with two men still inside. Charred remains were shoveled out at dawn. Rowan County became a place where men slept with their boots on and women learned to tell the difference between rifle shots and pistol fire without flinching. People didn't ask who died. They asked what side they were on, and every body added fuel to Craig Tolliver's rage. Morehead wasn't just a town anymore. It was a war that fed on blood. By 1887, the streets of Morehead had the same rhythm as a battlefield. Men walked fast, women kept their heads down, children knew to drop flat when they heard a crack echo through the holler. But what happened next didn't echo. It detonated. Sheriff James Hogg was one of the few men left willing to stand up to Craig Tolliver. He wasn't a saint, but he carried his badge like a promise. The law still meant something in Rowan County. Craig took that personally. On a blistering July afternoon, Sheriff Hogg stepped out of the courthouse, wiping sweat from his face, headed toward his horse, tied at the hitching post. He barely made it 5 steps. A shot rang out from the roofline. Hogg jerked forward, the bullet tearing through his spine and collapsing him to the ground. Before he could crawl, before he even understood he'd been hit, Craig's men stepped out from behind the hotel, rifles raised. No masks, no warnings. They fired in a line. The bullets tore into Hogg's back, chest, and legs until the dirt under him turned black and slick. Witnesses said the sheriff tried to raise his head, one last attempt at dignity. But a final round blew out his jaw and dropped him for good. And Craig Tolliver? He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching it happen like a man enjoying a bonfire. People screamed, store owners slammed doors. A woman fainted, but nobody intervened. Nobody rushed forward. Because in Morehead, stepping toward a dying man was a good way to join him. Hogg's body lay in the road for nearly an hour. Not because people didn't care, but because nobody wanted to be the next target. Rumors spread instantly. Craig owns the county. The law is dead. Morehead belongs to the Tollivers now. Funeral bells tolled before sunset, and in Frankfort, the governor's desk filled with letters, telegrams, and desperate pleas from Rowan County citizens begging for intervention. Most of them were anonymous because signing your name under Craig Tolliver's reign was a death wish. But the message was clear. If the state didn't act soon, Rowan County would burn. The governor read the sheriff's autopsy report. 9 gunshot wounds, some fired while Hogg was already face down. That was the line. He summoned the Kentucky State Guard, every available man, full deployment. Their orders were simple. March on Morehead, in the feud, arrest Craig Tolliver, dead or alive. And for the first time in 3 years, Rowan County felt a shift in the air. Craig Tolliver wasn't just fighting the Martins anymore. He was about to fight the entire damn state. The Kentucky State Guard marched into Rowan County at dawn, bayonets fixed, boots pounding the dirt road in a slow, unified thunder that no one in Morehead had heard in years. This wasn't symbolic. This was war coming to your doorstep. Citizens lined the streets, too scared to cheer, too relieved to speak. Women pulled their children indoors. Store owners shuttered their windows. The Martins quietly took positions, waiting to see if the state soldiers could do what they couldn't, stop Craig Tolliver. Inside the American Hotel, Craig wasn't panicked. He was loading ammunition. The Tolliver men barricaded doors, pulled mattresses against windows, and stacked crates into makeshift firing positions. The air inside smelled like sweat, pine boards, and gun oil. Craig walked the hallways like a general checking his fortress, passing out orders with that cold, steady voice that made his men shake and obey. The hotel wasn't just his hideout. It was his castle. He wasn't leaving alive, and he wasn't planning to die alone. The guards surrounded the hotel in a semicircle, rifles raised, waiting for the command. A young lieutenant stepped forward and shouted for Craig Tolliver to surrender. Silence. Then a single rifle cracked from the 3rd-floor window, the bullet whistling past the lieutenant's head and burying into the dirt behind him. That was Craig's answer. The officer dropped his hand. The guard opened fire. The hotel walls shook under the hail of bullets. Glass exploded outward. Shutters flew off their hinges. Wood splintered like bone. Inside, the Tolliver men returned fire from upstairs windows, every blast sending muzzle flashes through the smoke-filled room. One soldier fell to the ground, groaning and clutching his thigh. Another took a grazing shot across the cheek, blood streaking down his collar. But the State Guard kept advancing. Bullets punched through the hotel's siding, smashing lamps, ripping through bed frames, embedding themselves into the staircase. Men inside screamed as splinters carved into their faces. One Tolliver cousin took a round to the shoulder that knocked him off his feet and sent his rifle clattering across the floorboards. Craig never flinched. He kept yelling, "Hold your ground! Aim low! Make 'em pay!" After 30 minutes of nonstop gunfire, the guard brought up axes. Soldiers hacked at the front door, slamming steel into wood again and again until the hinges buckled and the barricade fractured. The moment the door crashed inward, Tolliver men on the stairs unleashed a shotgun blast down the entrance hallway. One soldier went down instantly, throat torn open, and another fell backward as buckshot tore through his coat. But the guards surged forward anyway, stepping over their wounded, firing upward into the darkened stairwell. Lead rain poured both directions. The hotel echoed with screams and ricochets. A Tolliver man tumbled down the stairs, dead before he hit the bottom. Another tried to run for the kitchen door, but caught a bullet between the shoulder blades and sprawled across the dining room table. Upstairs, Craig roared over the chaos. "To the back rooms! Hold the 2nd floor!" Craig retreated with his last handful of loyal men to the rear of the 2nd floor. A narrow hallway lit only by smoke and muzzle flashes. He knew the guard was closing in. He fired until his rifle clicked empty, then drew his revolver. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. The first soldier around the corner saw Craig standing there, broad-shouldered, blood on his face, revolver raised. The soldier fired first. The bullet ripped through Craig's left arm, spinning him sideways into the wall. Craig snarled, steadied himself, and shot back. His round punched into the soldier's chest, dropping him instantly. But the guard was done playing games. 3 soldiers advanced at once. They opened fire together. Craig Tolliver jerked back, slammed against the wall, and slid down it, leaving a wide red smear. His revolver fell from his hand. His boots twitched. His breathing stuttered, then stopped. The warlord of Rowan County, the man who turned Morehead into a killing ground, died in a cloud of smoke, splinters, and gunpowder. With Craig dead, the remaining Tolliver men threw down their guns. Some sobbed, some fled, some simply sat on the floor, too stunned to move. The guards swept through room by room, bodies everywhere, blood pooling through floorboards. Broken furniture, smashed lanterns, shattered windows. The 3-year war that choked Rowan County ended in 40 minutes of violence so fierce the hotel itself looked wounded. Outside, the townspeople finally stepped out of hiding. No cheers, no celebration, just relief, bone-deep, exhausted relief. The tyrant was dead, the feud was over, and the blood-soaked story of the Rowan County War would fade, overshadowed by bigger feuds with better publicists, but never forgotten by the people who lived through it. When the smoke cleared and the last Tolliver body was hauled out of the American hotel, Rowan County didn't celebrate. It exhaled, a long, shaky breath from a place that had forgotten what quiet even sounded like. For the first time in 3 years, people walked down Main Street without checking rooftops. Storefronts opened. Church bells rang without fear of gunfire answering back. But beneath that fragile peace was a truth everyone felt. The war had taken something from Morehead that no governor, no guard, no court could ever give back. Half the families involved in the feud moved away entirely, some out of grief, some out of shame, some because staying meant living among the ghosts of the men they killed or failed to save. The Martins lost husbands, sons, cousins. The Tollivers lost half their clan in the siege alone. And the people stuck in the middle lost everything else: crops, homes, sanity, security. There were children in Rowan County who could identify the sound of a .44 pistol blast before they could write their own names. Frontier trauma leaves deep roots. The governor ordered the remaining Tolliver sympathizers arrested or driven out. The American Hotel, once Craig's fortress, was stripped down, repaired, and eventually torn apart. Locals said the wood creaked at night for months afterward, like it remembered bullets passing through it. For years, the Kentucky State Guard kept a close eye on Morehead, terrified the fighting would flare back up. It didn't, because the heart of the war was dead, bleeding out on that second-floor hallway. As decades passed, the Rowan County War was overshadowed by more famous feuds: Hatfield's and McCoy's, Hargis versus Markham. But none of them matched the raw brutality of what happened in Morehead. The Hart brothers left bodies scattered across Kentucky. Craig Tolliver left a town swallowing its own grief. Locals said you could still feel it on certain nights, a heaviness in the air, the kind that makes you look over your shoulder as if the hills remember the crack of rifles and the smell of gunpowder. And maybe they do, because some wounds don't stitch shut, some wars don't end clean, and some places, especially in Kentucky, carry their bloodlines in the dirt. This was the Rowan County War, the feud that turned a Kentucky town into a battlefield, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous men aren't outlaws passing through. They're the ones who claim a town as their kingdom and dare anyone to take it back. You've been listening to Deadly Truths, Kentucky Bloodlines with Becca. If this story pulled you in, follow, rate, and share the show on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. It takes 2 seconds, and it keeps these forgotten histories alive. Full sources for every episode are listed in the show notes. Deadly Truths is independently researched, written, and produced. All opinions are my own. All events and individuals are presented strictly for educational, historical, and documentary purposes. And remember, the past isn't buried. In Kentucky, it's hiding in the bluegrass.